Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to day 2 of the NFL draft, the wrap party. I am Brendan. That is Brandon. We're about halfway through, all things considered. There's still a lot more to get into, but there was a lot of stuff that happened today, and we spent all day talking about it individually. Now we got to talk about it as a duo. So, Brandon, how you holding up?
I'm making it, man. I'm fighting the good fight.
Mm-hmm. I mean it can't be easy, but you're doing it. And this only happens once a year, right?
It makes it easier when my team's doing moves that I like. I'll say that. If I got to struggle through and fight the good fight, then at least you're making good picks. I'm like, yeah.
I can definitely get behind that. So today was day 2 of the 2024 NFL draft, which is rounds 2 and 3. So we got through about little shy of 70 picks total, I think, right around there. And we were mostly just members of the audience because we only had one pick today. It was in the middle of the 3rd round. A lot of people were expecting that maybe we would be looking to trade up. We didn't trade up. A lot of people were saying, well, maybe we'll trade down. We didn't do that either. We stuck at 81 and we picked, which I certainly have no problem with that. I certainly have no problem with it as a concept. And leading up to our pick, we obviously watch some things that happen that are kind of adjacent to us, right? We want to see what our division rivals are doing. So you see the Rams trade up to get Braden Fisk, seemingly panicking because there was a run on defensive linemen right around there. And even as somebody who liked Braden Fisk marginally, I felt pretty good about that one personally.
I did too.
Yeah. You had what else did we have here? We had the Cardinals getting Max Melton, which I like Max Melton. I think he's going to be good.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good one. We had what else? What else did we have? We had the 49ers gift Kingsley Suamaitai to the Chiefs for some reason. All these other teams in the league want to help the Chiefs out, help extend the dynasty. You got the Bills, and now you got the Chiefs just trying to make it easier for them.
Yeah. I wasn't a fan of what the Niners did in this draft until they went to Dominic Pooney. Pooney was the guy that I thought, okay, there, you guys are doing something right. Let's go.
Yeah, Renardo Green. I mean, I liked Renardo Green well enough. I don't know if I saw him as a 2nd-round player personally. It was like, okay, he's good, but I don't know if this is something that's really getting me excited. Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are having a really good draft. Trey Benson, best running back in this class. I'd say they got pretty good value there. Isaiah Adams, I thought was a reach, but I can see the vision. I can see the vision there a little bit. Didn't love that one. And then that kind of leads to our pick at number 81 overall, 17th pick of the 3rd round. Seattle Seahawks take Christian Haynes, UConn Husky guard, played right guard in college, although I'm sure we're going to talk about that as the show goes on.
Yeah.
Gonna definitely have to pull that apart a little bit. But yeah, Christian Haynes. So give me your initial impression of that.
Well, I love the pick. He was a highly rated guard for us coming in this draft. He might have been my number 2 guard coming into this draft. So getting that at the end of the 3rd round, and sorry, my voice is definitely going here. Getting that at the end of the 3rd round is great. I think that the Seahawks just had to sit pat in this draft, Brendan. They had to sit down and just say, hey, let's just let this draft come to us, because you mentioned the way that our teams win in our division. I think they did okay. But there's some weirdness in their picks. Like you said with Renardo, that's to be a 3rd round guy that they got in the 2nd round. Braden's a 3rd round guy that they got in the 2nd round. I think that there was a run on teams. There was a run on positions in this draft. Tackle, cornerback. Just seemed like teams started to pick in one direction and they started to run on them. And I think that worked in the Seahawks' benefit. And that's why John didn't trade up, is he's like, I don't have to trade up. They're doing my work for me. Haynes is a good all-around guard. He's good as a pass protector. He's good as a run blocker. He's a 4-year starter. I do think he can play left guard because he can hold up in pass protection well, and he moves well enough for both positions. He's a day 1 starter to me. I think he slides right in and he's good to go. So I think he should be really good. I think this was a great pick from the Seahawks. I think they very well potentially here, Brendan, got not only, let's just say, maybe the best defensive lineman in this draft, maybe the best defensive player in this draft, but then they might have also got, depending on who you ask, the best guard in this draft.
Hmm. Yeah, I was a big fan of this pick as well. I had him in the 60s on my big board. I had him as an early third round pick. So getting him in the late, mid third round is good value. I do think that he fills a need one way or the other. Either he slots over to left guard or he plays right guard. Anthony Bradford did not play well enough last year to where he should just be given the starting job. I don't think that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I like the pick a lot as well. It was one of many things we could have done at that pick that I definitely would have been fully supportive of. So I definitely can get behind this one as well. In your estimation, do you think how do you think this plays out? Does Christian Haynes play left guard? Does he play right guard and Bradford becomes a backup, or does Bradford bump over to the left side, or maybe does Haynes even play center? How do you see this working out?
I think he's probably they say that I think that Mike McDonald said he ideally sees him as a right guard initially. I think he has the ability to transition to left guard though in a way that a former third round pick and Damian Lewis couldn't. I don't think Damian was as I know he's a left guard now, and but to me he's really more of a right guard. That's a pure right guard. Damian Lewis.
Mhm.
This guy can play the left guard side. He's got it in his bag. So I think that he eventually goes in and settles into left guard. But you mentioned Bradford. Bradford's really athletic. He's capable of handling the duties on the left side. He's not a pure right guy either. I think Seattle has some versatility here on who they choose to put where on this line, and having two guys that can play both of those positions and play them well is a good problem to have. But insurance at Bradford doesn't develop, like you said. He was raw around the edges. We expected that. He's also a very different player from Bradford, Brendan, in that this is a guy that has started 4 years. Remember with Bradford, what do you have? 17 starts coming out of college or something like that.
Mhm.
So you're getting a guy that is well down the line in refinement and his ability to get on the field and, in my opinion, play immediately. So I like that draw about this, where not only did they go for value, they got a guy that can play immediately and it fits the need. It's that eclipse thing I talk about where you want need and value to intersect, like that eclipse we had a couple of days ago. And that's just what happened here to me with this pick.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I don't like to assume that players can change position just because on paper it seems like it would make sense for them to be able to.
Mhm.
But the difference is Christian Haynes is actually very athletic. He's one of the more athletic right guards I've ever seen. Ran a 5.0340, which is 93rd percentile for all guards, not just right guards, all guards. 1.75 10-yard split, 77th percentile for all guards. So he's fast and he's quick, and 33-inch vert, 94th percentile. So this guy is a very good athlete for the right guard spot. I even called him one of the best right guard athletes I've seen. And I even said, the reason why there's a difference between the left guard and the right guard is the left guard has to be more athletic because he's dealing with more pass rushers. He's dealing with more guys who are going to give you fits in terms of their ability to rush the passer.
Mhm.
So if you look at Haynes, it's almost enough to make you wonder, why did this guy end up playing right guard in college when he's this athletic? You would think a guy like that would find his way on the left side. Now, I don't know what the answer is, but the upshot, what I'm trying to get across here is that he should be able to do both as long as he can get past that part where, going from the right to the left is like doing everything backwards. I'm not saying you can do that overnight, but
Mhm.
I do think that on paper, unlike Damian Lewis, who was not athletic, he should be able to do it.
He should. And even if he just slides into right guard, Brendan, this is a pure fit for your scheme, right? Because that's the
Mhm.
mobility side of this too, is that you need guys that can move in space. And so even if he does fit to just right guard or goes to left guard, you're having a guy that you need on this line that can get to the second level blocks, that can pull out in space, that can do all of that type of stuff. I mean, the screen game, you mentioned Lewis. How many times did you watch over the last couple of years? Lewis tried to get out there in the traditional screen game to the back, and he just couldn't get out to the linebacker in time. The linebacker swoops around him. He's kind of clutching at air or falling on his face because he's trying to
Mhm.
get out there so fast, and he just didn't have the tools to get out there. This guy does, and so much of this offense is going to be. Go watch Washington last year. You watched a ton. How much of it is them pulling? Sometimes pulling two guys on one play back across the formation. You've got to be able to move in this scheme for it to work. And unlike what we did with Baldwin's scheme before, where we didn't get the mobile offensive lineman for it to work, now in Olawatimi and Bradford, in Nick Harris, and in Haynes, and Lucas and Cross, these are all guys that work in a mobile-based system.
Mhm. And that's to me is the big draw here. That could even supersede having players that are great. You'd rather
Mm,
have a player who's good and is a scheme fit than a player who's great but is a miserable scheme fit.
yeah.
I think that Damian Lewis, for a lot of his tenure here, was a pretty good player, but he
Mhm.
just wasn't a fit for what we were trying to do, and that made him look much worse than he was.
Exactly.
So, um, I did have him as my number one right guard in this class. If you were just looking at him as a guard and you're comparing him to the other just pure guards, I would probably put Graham Barton ahead of him. After that, I think it's kind of open season. And Graham Barton might be a center, by the way. A lot of people view him as a
Yeah.
center. So you could start making a pretty compelling argument that he is up there once you stop assuming that he's just going to play right guard. So you may have gotten the best player at that position. I think that once you remove the left versus right dichotomy, he's probably a little cleaner than Cooper Beebe, who teams for some reason just didn't like very much. I still don't really know what happened there.
Well, that's the difference between Haynes and BB and the athleticism, right?
Hmm.
Because BB just the movement stuff was the stuff you worried about with him, where you don't worry about this with Haynes, and that's where we all love BB, we did, but was he as pure a scheme fit here? Maybe not, maybe not
Hmm.
to that degree. Brendan, when you look at these past two drafts, and I was thinking about this, and I think we can even go back further where we're looking at 3 years ago draft with Kenneth Walker and some of the other players in that draft. The last 3 years, you've done a good job, in my opinion, of grabbing the best player at their position in the draft. I think
Hmm.
you did it with Kenneth Walker a couple of years ago. I think you did it with Witherspoon last year. I think you might have done it with JSN in last year's draft. We'll see how he develops moving forward. And then in this year's draft, you took the best defensive lineman in the draft, and then you probably took the best right guard. To me, when we're talking about what are the hallmarks of building a team right to getting that team to be great, well, when you're putting elite talent at each of these positions on every draft, when you're finding multiple players in a given draft that are the top at their position, I think this is the way that you turn around the fates of your team and where they're going. So you think I'm off on that? Or I mean, if you think about that more and more for the last 3 years, I think you, even in a year where you go, Boye Mafe wasn't the best edge, was he the second best edge behind Aiden Hutchinson? I mean, isn't he not better than Trayvon Walker at this point?
Right now, yeah, I mean, I'm not too into Walker. I'm not really buying what that guy's selling right now. But yeah, I did think that Brees Hall was a better running back than K9. Now Hall's torn his ACL. He's not the same player he was going to be. But it was very close. I think they literally went back-to-back picks, in fact. So it was very close. I think JSN was the best receiver in that class. He obviously hasn't had the best start to his career. You got guys like Puka Nasua breaking rookie records. It's hard to compete with that. But
Yeah.
at the
That's
time, I
also a
think he
little
was
bit about
probably the
targets,
best.
right? That's also about the
Mhm.
the use, right? He comes here, he's behind DK, he's behind Tyler, he's got Noah Fant. You got to run heavy based offense. It's gonna be hard to get as many touches in that situation versus, like, let's say some of these other guys like Nathaniel Tankdell or Jordan Addison or who you mentioned in Puka, who was, you had Cooper Cup down for the first half of the year. He's number one. He's their number one target at that point, basically. So you benefit when you get to have more of those touches and targets. I think JSN will end up being a guy that we do look at as that guy. I think Puka had a great year. I did, but I think JSN is for real.
Hmm. I'm inclined to agree. But yeah, so more on Phil Haynes. Another thing to worth noting, he was a team captain for the Yukon Huskies. So if you value things like leadership, that's something that he's bringing to the table as well. And it's not just that he's a great athlete. If you look at the tape from Yukon, he is proven in his ability to do pull blocks and play in space. This
Mhm.
is not like you have some players who are athletic when they test, but we don't know if they can actually do it or not because they didn't actually do it in college. This guy did.
Yeah.
So we're getting a relatively known commodity there. But unlike a lot of these guards, I don't feel like he sacrifices that much in the strength department because he's athletic. Like there are
Yeah.
guards out there who can't move anybody. This guy can move people.
hmm He's got the 33.5-inch arms on that 6'3" build, which is that unusual proportions that actually work in his favor because he wins the natural leverage war at his size going up against those 6'4", 6'5" defensive tackles you get inside. And then he's got the long arms to beat them out on the lockout, where he can get to them on their chest before they can get to him on his chest. That's a 1-2 punch that helps you win a rep right out the gate. I win leverage. I get my hands on you before you get your hands on me. And so you're right about also the moving in space stuff. How many guys did we watch in this draft and scouting, Brennan, Tyler Guyton types who what the I forget who took, but it was the Cowboys took Guyton. Here's a guy that moves in space wonderfully, right? Very athletic, but he can't hit a target sign for his ass. You know, he's constantly off on his strike point. Where you get other guys that can move in space, but for some reason, by the time they get to the second level block, they're always stumbling, falling over their feet, or about to fall over. You know, they can't lay the block accurately. This guy can move into the spot, square the man up, and hit the block right. He can complete the whole process.
Yeah, and I also thought that he was a smart player. He's somebody who understands how to handle a more complex rush scheme. Like, I'm not just blocking the guy right in front of me. They actually drop that guy into coverage, and they brought the other guy around on a pull or a twist or a stunt. I'm going to pick that guy up. He gets that kind of stuff as well. He's a smart, so he's very close to the full package here.
Yeah, that's where you come back to that left guard upside too, right, Brendan? Where you go, man, he's so good in pass, bro. I agree. I saw the same thing with dealing with blitzers. You couldn't run games on this guy. You can't run stunts. You can't run loops. He's on it. And maybe this is that thing I come to where I say that 4-year starter thing. You can see in these players that have that 4 years of starting where they've got that wisdom they bring, Brendan, you know, where they've seen it, they've done it. They have a good understanding of just how to naturally play the game. And you just don't get to this guy in blitzes. You don't fool him. You don't trick him. He, to your point, smartly reactive is the two words I'd use for how he handles blitzes and those kind of things. So outstanding player all the way around. And I think like the 14th highest graded guard in college football last year, equally well graded in both pass protection and as a run blocker. That fits to what you see from him on tape.
Yeah, he allowed 1 sack combined over the last 2 seasons, 2 quarterback hits, and 12 hurries. Most of those hurries were last year for whatever that's worth, but it's a pretty impressive run of keeping his quarterback clean. Now, he is playing for UConn. That's not exactly Alabama or Georgia or anything like that. But I don't get the sense that this guy's going to be overwhelmed by NFL level talent or anything like that because he measures up. He went to the combine and he posted incredibly good numbers.
Yeah, that's five flat with a 320, Brendan. If you usually see these kind of testing scores on a lineman, it's going to be a sub 300 guy, 302, 303. They're not going to be up around that 320 mark, and he probably plays about 325. So he's got the movement with that girth that he brings. Like you say, there's a little bit of usually you have to take that. You have to kind of pick your point. You know, do we want to go with the light guy that can move, but he can't push guys off the ball? Or you're getting a bit of the best of both worlds with Christian Haynes in that he can move people and he can move. And that's what part of what just makes him so unusual as a prospect. 25 reps with 33.5-inch arms on the bench. 25. That's very impressive for that long arms. Shows the power that he brings to this table. He's got really heavy hands. When he first hits those hands, and he's got the long hands, so when they hit first, they're also hitting with the heavy nature, and that really helps him initially win the rep. You know, even if the defender can kind of recover and get back into it, initially he's always getting the win.
Some of the concerns I had with him when I was studying him a couple months ago, the first 2 things are things that should easily be fixable. He sometimes leans at the waist into contact, so that's something that gets you off balance a little bit. And his hand width, he doesn't get his hand width quite right sometimes. Those are both things that I think should be easy to clean up.
Agreed, especially on that second one, because it's just draw your hands in rather than get them out wide. I agree. The hand strike sometimes it's heavy. It's not always super accurate. So it's certainly valid on that part where he gets into a little bit, and then you get into hugging when the hands get out wide. And I think that's just the leaning to is him trusting the length too much, you know, rather than sinking down and then getting the arms out here. It's just you're going to lean down on the guy and go like this. And it's kind of like, well, your hands can't get to me. I'll just keep you out here. It's a little bit of a laziness technique thing. It's not a thing that can't be fixed, but yes, something I also saw on tape with him.
Yeah, he probably just knows he can get away with it at UConn when going up against the competition that he's going up against. He's not going to be able to get away with it in the NFL, but that should be pretty easy to clean up. What else did I have? I think he can get attacked by speedier rushers, but that would only be a concern if you had him at left. If you put him on the right side, he's going to be going up against nose tackles and one techs and guys who are not speedy at all. So depends on how you use them.
Yeah.
And I do think he might attract a few holding penalties in the NFL, but that's kind of related to his hands. So that's another thing that can probably be cleaned up.
Yeah. It will be a problem if he can't clean it up because the NFL won't let you get away with hugging. That's the easiest holding calls to call is when the hands go out wide and you end up like this.
So you would expect this guy one way or the other to be a starter day one?
Day one, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with all that. And I don't think there's too much else to say about this one. We're both into it. We both like it a lot. I don't think there's a lot to pull apart here. I don't see really anybody criticizing this pick very much. I haven't seen anyone, including hundreds of people in my stream chat, people in my Discord, people on X or YouTube comments. I don't see anybody playing devil's advocate here.
I think you'd have to heavily play devil's advocate / you'd have to be intellectually dishonest to look at this pick and try to pick it apart and look bad at it. Because you can take away things that are absent your own or my own biases here, Brendan. You know, when you look at that, I don't know if you look at the PFF tracker that they have, it was a little bit faster, so I was on that one. But they had all of the ranks of the players of their position down the line. And what you saw with that when you went through that third round, nobody had that guy as high as we had our guy at him. They had him as one of 10 in the guards in this draft at PFF. You know, that's PFF. You know, that's PFF giving him that grade, even though they had technically a higher grade last season on BB. But they had this guy's a higher place. And that's not a place that's biased to being a Seahawks fan. So this is a pick that will be universally praised. It is a pick where John, I got to give him credit, Brendan, because there's got to be a pull there to maybe try to trade up where you're like seeing some of this good stuff drop and you know you need an interior offensive lineman. There's a little bit of a run going on. BB goes off the board, and he just stood pat and trusted the process. There's going to be a good player pick there because of all those teams up ahead of us, in my opinion, that kind of crap the bed here, Brendan. I think a lot of teams kind of ended up pushing a little bit for a need or worried about the run of players. You mentioned the Rams. I think that's absolutely what they did. I think they went, holy hell, we suddenly got, there's not very many defensive linemen, and now there's a run on them. We got to grab them. That's not a smart approach to drafting, though. That doesn't bring you to success drafting. That's where you go and fail to draft.
Right. I think that there was one person in my chat who said there was a report that the Rams wanted Sweat, and then he went. So then they panicked and traded up to get Fisk instead. My thing is, like, Sweat and Fisk could not be more different. Like, I know they played nominally the same area of the field, but you could not find two more different defensive linemen. So
agreed. Yeah. Well, and that if that report's true, it's exactly proof to what I'm talking about, right? Being that pick wasn't made because they just love Braden Fisk over the moon. It was made because we got to get our defensive lineman. We lost Aaron Donald. We didn't take a defensive tackle with our first pick. We took an edge. We got to get a defensive lineman. And that's where I think a lot of these teams were driven by that. And it just pulled them to need over and over and over again. And that worked completely in Seattle's benefit. I think John might have been more likely to have moved up in this draft if it played a little bit more to kind of the consensus boards and the way that people thought this stuff was going to go. But I mean, Andrew Phillips, Kentucky cornerback going in the third round.
Yeah, I didn't have that on my big board.
No, I didn't have mine.
I liked him a little more than you did, but
you did, but you didn't like him into the third round range. You know, you were Maurice Lafafu, Notre Dame middle linebacker, 5th round. I got a 5th round grade on. You're going to pass on Trotter. You're going to pass on Cedric Gray.
Yeah,
for that.
There's no accounting for taste sometimes, I guess. Like, how is TJ Tampa still on the board and guys like Jerry Jones are coming off it? Elijah Jones comes off the board. I had him in the 6th round.
Yeah. This is what I'm talking about, Brendan. I think John's probably sitting there and he's like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Tyrone Hopper? Tyrone Hopper?
Yeah, I was over Peyton Wilson. And I know Peyton Wilson, I guess his leg fell off or something. He's hobbling around on one leg.
Yeah.
I get
it. You still look at it and go, that just doesn't add up. It doesn't seem like the right value. Those felt like 4th, 5th round guys minimum. You took them a little bit early. To me, it spoke to the fact that there was a bit of a run here. And it holds, you can see the signs of it because you'll see these positions picked back to back, right? Or 3 out of the 4 positions are picked to this one side. To me, that's a dead ringer at that point for teams are freaking out a little bit about this given positional group. You mentioned the corner. I think teams start freaking out because so many corners got taken. Where we have 4 in the 1st round, and then you start off in the 2nd round. We had a kind of a run at the start of the 2nd round, right? Where we had
Rook Oro went, and then Sweat went, and then you had Jerzon Newton, and then Newton. So you had a little bit of a run on the line, which is probably why the Rams traded up to get somebody. Yeah, because the next lineman to go after that was Mason Smith. That's a disaster, by the way, in the middle of the 2nd round. What in the world? At that.
Oh, dude, Mason Smith. Did you laugh your ass off when you saw that one? Because we both been looking at that guy for 2 years. We watched that guy very close. Like, folks, Mason's one of those guys that we had far out advance on in looking at this guy. So this was one of the guys we took a long period of time to look at. I could not believe they made that selection. I couldn't believe it, Brendan. That one blew my mind on that one. But look at that top of that 2nd round. You know, you've got, at first it's the receivers, right?
Mhm.
It's just like it's like everybody got told, okay, now we're picking receivers. Okay, now we're picking defensive tackles. Okay, now we're gonna go to cornerbacks, right? It goes receiver, receiver, then your defensive tackle, then you go to corners. And I think that's that run there that just ended up throwing everything off from the second round down. Um, and set it in Seattle's favor at that point. It just worked back around to our favor. This is how we land Haynes in the way we did. Why
Mhm.
we'll probably land a really good inside linebacker tomorrow, maybe with the first pick, because you've just let the board fall to you. As
Mhm.
simplistic as that may sound, as easy as that may sound, that's just what John's done. He didn't panic. He didn't jump. He just sat and let the board cleanly fall to him.
That's right. So, let's see here. What I mean, do you buy that the Seahawks might have been in on some of these tackle converts that went right before our pick, like Delmar Glaze, Matt Goncalves, or God, who was the other guy? Maybe the Yale Kieran Amegadji. Do
Kieran's
you
a
think?
tough one. It's Kieran's possible. But I didn't have enough tape to really look at it with him to get a certain feel that he would have. He obviously athletically would have been a fit inside. Delmar
Mhm.
Glaze might have been an interesting one because that's a guy that I liked a lot more than other people did, and I thought that that was a guy that would kick well inside to left guard purely. There you go, left tackle, left guard. He's great in there. So maybe more of an outlook of him being that left guard, which may have been more ideal for Seattle if he had come to them in that spot.
Mhm.
So it's possible. Goncalves is very much the same way. He's a tackle convert that's going inside. I don't think Goncalves moved quite as well. He's still kind of just a big guy going
Yeah,
inside a little bit.
I wasn't too impressed with Goncalves. He was not one of the guys that I would have been very excited about. Definitely happier with the way things worked out, but I wonder if we had those guys ahead of Haynes on our board, maybe because of the left guard versus right guard dichotomy.
It is possible. It would be interesting to see where they stood with those guys for sure, especially understanding these are transition guys and that this is what it takes to find that good left guard. Let's say is you got to get the transition guy. You're not going to find the pure left guy out in the college scene.
All right, Garth Knight, thank you for the $1.99. Xavier Worthy is not Tyreek Hill, right? No, I mean Casey is hoping that he is. I think he's a little more John Ross than Tyreek Hill myself.
Yeah, Garth, I just don't buy into the worthy hype myself. I understand speed kills in the NFL. I get it. I understand all that, but he is a guy that has a really tiny catch radius. What do you got, 29-inch arms, Brennan? And you feel that where he just can't extend out there and catch. Contested catch situations, not happening. He needs to have a lot of space opened up for him to make the grab. Does he have the speed? Sure. But he's not Tyreek Hill. I don't even think he's Deshaun Jackson. I think Deshaun Jackson was a more well-rounded receiver coming out than Xavier Worthy is. And so, are they going to find a way to make him useful in that offense? I mean, is Patrick Mahomes just going to probably occasionally just drop back and say, F it, as Xavier's down there somewhere and
Hmm.
throw it 75 yards and hope he can kind of complete? Probably. But I don't think that they're going to be. I think the better way for them to have gone, it would have been like a Lad McConkey. Get Mahomes more of a guy that on the often can create the early separation on routes, can run the West Coast offense purely the way that Reed comes from in his origins with Holmgren and Bell Walsh going back to the day. That's not Worthy. Worthy's not an exact route runner. He's going to be more of an off script guy that they're going to probably rely on when Mahomes starts to kind of scramble around, which is great. Maybe that'll work. Maybe that'll be enough to get the value from him,
Yeah.
but not in the same camp as some of these other light speed burners that we've had come through.
Yeah, I guess they're just trying to build an offense around speed. They've got because they got Hollywood Brown, right? They got Hollywood, and he's still really fast. I think he ran like a 4.27, and has lost maybe a little bit of that, but not a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
then you've got Worthy on the other side, and then you've got Rashid Rice at 120 miles an hour or whatever it was.
Yeah. No, it's possibly where they're going. And my comp for Xavier Worthy was that guy. So, what was the name you just mentioned? The other guy,
Hollywood.
Hollywood. I thought he was a Hollywood guy as far as his real true comp. And Hollywood's been okay as a receiver in the NFL. I don't think he's been anything exceptional. The speed sometimes is there and shows up and you feel it. Sometimes you don't. I think Worthy's going to be the same kind of way. It's going to be a bit of a mixed bag. And considering the receivers that were on the board there for Casey at the time, just throw out Lad McConkey. The other guys that were there, I think there were better fits for that Chiefs offense than going with Worthy.
I would have rather gone with Adonai. And I guess the whole league hates Adonai because he was around for quite some time after that. But I liked Adonai more.
I guess the work ethic concerns were legitimate with him, that he felt
Yeah.
as far as talented as he is. I like the Donai as well. I mean, just there's a variety of guys in there I would have looked at if I think Malachi Corley would have been maybe interesting in there.
Roman Wilson, I
Um,
liked more.
you can make the argument for like in Roman. I'm with that probably too. I just
Yeah,
think he's a one trick pony, and I don't
yeah,
think that's that valuable in the NFL anymore.
yeah. I will say though, there is definitely a scenario here where we're all really, really unhappy for the next 10 years
Hmm.
as Mahomes gets the fastest man in the league to throw the ball to. I could see that playing out. I just think it's a narrow path.
Well, in the off script stuff to Worthy breaking deep, he like his initial route can't generate separation. Mahomes pirouettes, he breaks off into the second round, gets deep. Can Worthy then find just value within that outside of being traditional? Yeah. So even if you're just kind of like, you know, sort of just salvaging what you can from him at that point, that's still a hell of a salvage.
Hmm.
So it probably will work. And I'll tell you this with Hollywood Brown and him on the outside, the one thing the Chiefs are going to drive is a lot of cover two shell looks, which means they're really going to be able to probably still take advantage of running the ball and hitting the short stuff underneath and dinking and dunking people to death, which has been a little bit more of how that offense is run in
Hmm.
recent years.
Hmm. Let's see here. Beyond Balance, thank you for the $5. Is it just me, or has anyone else missed a Brandon draft meltdown the last 3 drafts? Almost not worth the good drafts.
Yeah, I know. I'm becoming a company man, Brennan. I'm
Hmm.
becoming a bit of a Seahawks front office bootlicker here a little bit.
I mean, I've had one draft meltdown in my time doing this. It was Jordan Brooks because I didn't know
Mm,
who he was, which was
yes.
really, really annoying because that was one of the first years I did a lot of homework on the draft.
Mm,
And I'm like, we just spent a first round pick on a guy who may, he might as well be a baseball player as far as I'm concerned. I literally don't know who he is. I didn't even freak out with the Eskridge pick, but it's been it's been a very different last 3 years. And as someone who didn't love the Murphy pick personally, I mean, I can still say it feels very different than it used to be.
Yes, it does. And I mean, for me, those first three drafts I did with LJ Collier, Jordan Brooks, and Eskridge was I just didn't like the picks. And I'm glad in retrospect I was proven right on those, as I think my reaction was validated in retrospect on all of those because I did lose my stuff, Brendan. I didn't do it in the good, mature content creating way we're supposed to do it. I just completely lost my stuff, I was like, what in the hell? But these last drafts have been so good, and I can recognize what they're doing and that they're operating from value is the thing that I was begging for years. I was seeing these other teams out there doing that, and that was driving not only their great drafts, but allowing them sustained great play on the field as far as how long they could go through generations of players because they stayed in that mold. And the fact that the Hawks have gone here for 3 straight years, I'm going to do nothing but stand up and applaud because this is the way you build great teams. This is the way that you create sustained success. You want to win forever. It ain't about, catchy slogans. It's about drafting the value. And the Seahawks have done that now 3 straight years. And they've done it not just sort of passingly or quasi, they've done it resoundingly. And
Mhm,
that's why I'm so over the moon on them Beyond Balance and really praising them. And that I really believe in what they're doing. I believe in this approach. And I think it's going to bear out the greatest success for this team in the long term.
mhm. Let's see here. Tim Tishumi. Thank you for the $5 for some throat lozenges, buddy.
Thank you, Tim. I really do appreciate it, man. It's maybe the voice will be back by tomorrow. It's
Yeah.
dodgy, but it's all right.
Yeah. On a couple of occasions have gotten the 2 bags of 200 off of
Yeah.
Amazon, and they throw in like a free tube of these other throat lozenges that are like really, really cold or something.
Okay.
They like feel really cold in your mouth. And it's different. It's kind of fun. It's kind of
Yeah.
cool to have something a little bit different. But it's not that expensive at least. It's
No.
pretty reasonably priced.
Oh, this is your cheapie. I'm full in on the Ricola right now. So
Yeah,
it's,
Ricola's I've had a lot of Ricolas in my life.
I think I'm about 45 deep today so far.
Hmm.
A lot of menthol in the back.
Oh boy.
It's
Uh,
I can't feel my throat, Brendan, but it's getting better.
There's got to be a way to. Can't you just buy like menthol in the bottle and like find some way to like mainline it?
Squirted the bag. Oh,
Yeah, one of the YouTubers I watch, he made a sausage a couple months ago laced with menthol, and
oof.
because he's the sausage king of YouTube, and he tries to make all kinds of sausages, and when he put it on the frying pan to actually cook it, and he kind of realized right after he did that oh, this is going to be really bad, and the whole like it's like 300 people in there smoking a cigar all of a sudden.
Oh,
He's
jeez.
like, this is the worst thing I've ever done.
This was a bad choice.
Yeah.
Did he eat it?
He tried to. He had one bite and then realized it was literally poison and gave it the lowest score of any sausage he's ever made.
Oh, that sounds so nasty. That
Yeah, and
sounds so disgusting.
he's made a sausage out of dirt.
Oh, jeez. Okay. He's committed to the sausage process. Love it.
Yes. Let's see here. Primo, thank you for the $1.99. What's up, guys? Who's next? Tight end? Cade Stover? Yeah, before we parted today, I did want to ask, what are you kind of geared up for going into day 3 here? Because we pick very early tomorrow. We will probably
Mm.
pick within the first 5 minutes of the draft starting up again.
Well, I think obviously the two inside linebackers that remain on the board that I had third round grades on would be very tantalizing here, Brennan. Jeremiah Trotter, Cedric Gray. The one thing is with that though too is that you have a lot of guys into sort of what I would have as a fourth round graded inside linebacker: Nathaniel Watson, Jordan McGee, Jalen Ford, Curtis Jacobs, Edafana Uliafosio, Michael Barrett, Darius Muasau. All of those guys I have late fourth round grades, and so John might look at it and say, well, while I love Gray and I love Trotter, I can get a near talent to what those guys are right here. Can I get as near a talent to a different position? You mentioned tight end, which is a smart one there, Primo. It could be Cade Stover. I know Brendan loves himself some Cade Stover. I'm more of the Jatavian Sanders and where he sits, and that he's a second round graded guy. As I've got stood on my board, that'd be great value to get that guy to me in the early fourth round. So he would be the one that would jump out to me. The Seattle's met with Jatavian Sanders, so there has been at least some passing interest on that guy. I think the tight end is a little bit of a pull, Brendan. I think subtly safety is a little bit like inside linebacker, where Jaden Hicks, Darian Taylor Demerson, Katan Olawadipu, Malik Mustafa, Jalen Simpson. There's a variety of very talented safeties also here into this day that could prove too tantalizing for us not to pick. All of our guys are on one-year deals. So while I would think inside linebacker, tight end, safety would certainly make a lot of sense. And even as an outside the box, how about receiver? I mean, if this team went with Malik Washington, it would freak a lot of people out, but I love Malik Washington. So I know it would trip people out for that kind of pick, but kid's good, really good.
Absolutely. My top player remaining is Jatavion Sanders. I feel like he's getting punished because he played with 2 elite receivers at Texas. And also, actually, you could also throw Jonathan Brooks in there too. He played with him for most of the season. So,
I'm sorry. Keelan too, backup running back. He's going to be
drafted. Oh yeah, Keelan. But yeah, I don't know what he's still doing here. I don't know. I mean, I know that Ben Sinote's really good, and I understand him going above Sanders, but the fact that we're 100 picks in and nobody wants him is very surprising to me. Cedric Van Pran still there, if you want to go that way. I like Van Pran a lot. I don't know why the league kind of soured on him as this year went along. And I would also throw TJ Tampa and Kyrie Jackson in there, 2 corners that I liked quite a bit, who I don't know what they're doing outside the top 100. But I agree with a lot of what you said. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Cedric Gray are also 2 guys that I would be interested on. I would like to know. It's hard for me to say which one I would want more, because when I look at it, I would like to ask, who does Mike McDonald think fits his defense better? Right? That's kind of what matters here, because they're very different players, Trotter and Gray. And I would just wonder, if you gave Mike McDonald the choice, who would he prefer?
I think they also play 2 different positions. I think Trotter's a Mike. I think Cedric Gray's a Will. So that was a possibility I was going to ask you about, is what about the possibility of you end up taking both those 2 guys in this round?
Well, we do pick again at 118, so that's very much on the table here, especially if these teams continue to value these linebackers that I thought much less of, more than these guys. Like, just as an example, the other Notre Dame guy, the one Notre Dame guy, Lualfu, went off, but there was Bertrand. Maybe he ends up getting elevated in some way that I'm not anticipating. Jalen Ford, who I like, but I certainly didn't see him on the same level as guys like Gray and Trotter. So I'm definitely keeping an open mind here. Stover is another one for sure. If you feel like Haynes is going to be your left guard, you could double up on guard and go Mahogany, who I think is the second best right guard in this class. I would at least, consider the possibility.
That'd be strong.
Yeah. Receiver wise, since you mentioned receiver, there is Malik Washington. There's also Devontae Walker. And you nailed it, by the way. Troy Franklin slipped all the way to round 4. I didn't think it was going to happen, but it did.
Yeah. He's just too
Yeah,
floppy. He's too floppy.
yeah.
His routes are floppy. He's inexact. He's imprecise. He gets open. He makes catches, but that's going to make NFL teams nervous where they're like, look, you can't just freelance your way to getting open at the next level. You got to execute your routes.
By the way, all 3 Washington receivers went before any Oregon receivers this year.
I mean, my Jalen Polk, Odell Beckham comp looks better after he's picked there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that was my comp. I was like, man, I'm seeing Odell Beckham guys with the way he gets up the field in that first 10 yards and the way he's so competitive at the catch point and he's just got those lockdown hands. It was really cool to see Jalen Polk go, man. Congrats on the Huskies too, man. It was great seeing so many guys drafted, but to see Jalen go that early ahead of all these other receivers in a rich wide receiver draft, he was picked in a thin wide receiver draft. Here's a guy that got picked way higher than everyone thought he was going to go in a very deep wide receiver draft.
Oh, yes. But yeah, I'm going to keep an open mind tomorrow because we have 2 picks pretty close to each other, and there's a lot that I think would be good value.
There really is. And what's nice about this 2 primo is we talk about these positions. Middle linebacker, good collection of guys. You could see Mike McDonald liking a few of these guys. Tight end. Let's look at this one. On top of, look, I'm not big on Kate Stover, but the value will be fine there. You've got Theo Johnson still out there. You've got Jaheim Bell, in addition to the Jadavian Sanders. These guys will be later on in the day, I think. But there's a lot of good still tight ends into this class right now as far as possibilities go. So, Jared Wiley in there, AJ Barner, Tanner McClatchin. What's nice is the same thing as like safety, middle linebacker, and tight end. There's a lot of depth here into day 3 that you wouldn't normally have. This is kind of what I say about like, this is kind of fell in our lap this draft because the positions that we'd want deep at this time of the draft are going to be deep.
Mm-hmm. Garth Knight, thank you for the $4.99. What's a fantasy football projection for my guy JSN next year, as long as I'm not concerned with the Hawks winning games? I would never think too highly of JSN in fantasy as long as Metcalf and Lockett, and now I'd even throw Noah Fant in there, are part of the show. Like, there's just one ball. It's never going to be. I don't think JSN's going to be like some 1,300-yard receiver as long as Metcalf and Lockett are here.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Garth. I think he's looking at probably an 800 to 900-yard season. Not because he doesn't take a step forward in his game and he improves and he looks even better than he did last year, but because there's only so many balls to go around. And obviously the offense, I think, being more consistent than they were, or being able to be on the field a little bit more often than they were last year, as they were very efficient, will help too. Targeting the middle of the field will help too. But I think as long as you have all of these receivers on this team and so many good targets and 2 running backs that are really good, it's going to be hard for him to come out and really have a breakout year. These other guys that in this draft class that might outperform him are just able to be targeted more, able to be the number 1 option at times within their offense. And that's going to, with it, make you more productive.
Mm-hmm. But he'll be a valuable part of what we do for sure. He'll probably be really good on third down. That's kind of his calling card. And we'll be happy we have him.
That's really beyond the stats, Garth. I would say, can this guy be one of the league leaders in third down catches and helping the chains continue to move forward? I mean, that's the point you bring him in. That's what's made Amon St. Brown so good for the Lions. One of the best teams in the league at consistent drives every time they get the ball. They may not score every time, but that offense is going to be on the field. It's going to churn some clock. They're going to get the third down conversions. And a lot of it's on the back of Amon Brown running those option routes where he's just about almost unguardable with his quickness. And ideally, you'd like to do the same here. So if he's up there in one of the league leaders as the number of his catches that go for first downs, then he's doing a great job in that slot, regardless of if he's not at the 900 yards of production. But that might be my barometer for him next year, Brendan.
Mm-hmm. Radu Tukan, thank you for the $4.99. What do y'all think of the new Guardian? I think that's supposed to be Guardian helmet approval for in-game use. Are we becoming too soft, or am I tripping?
Accordion kind of works too, though. It looks like a little bit of an accordion, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I if it doesn't change the game, I don't think I see a problem with it. I'm not sure it's going to fix anything, but
it's gonna be like when John Olerud was wearing the helmet out at first base all those years for the Mariners. He's because he has that head injury. Mm-hmm. It's gonna look weird, Brendan. It's gonna look really weird, isn't it?
Didn't Wes Welker wear something like that when he came back from a concussion? He looked like he was in Daft Punk or something. He had this giant helmet on his tiny head or something.
Yeah. It was kind of the precursor, I guess, to the Guardian helmet. So look, is it making it safer? I guess it looks really weird. It's going to take some time to get used to when there are guys wearing it. I will say this too, Brennan. These players worry so much about their swag and their drip. I don't think there's going to be a long line of players that are going to be signing up to elongate the size of their head twice its size by the look of it. I think it's going to be probably medical people that are like, if I get another concussion, I'm out of the league using it, which, okay. I get it on that side of it. Can't argue with it. And if there's guys like this that helps them elongate their career, I'm good with it. But it is going to look really strange on the football field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when I played Little League Baseball and they started going to fast pitch. I had a batter's helmet with a football grill on the front,
Yeah.
and it actually came in clutch for me on a couple of occasions. I'll say that.
I took one right. I took it in practice one day with the guy that threw the hardest on our team. Like his fastballs was all he had, and he drilled me right in the face.
Mm-hmm.
One day we didn't have those on ours. I was too old back in that day. Dan Brandon, they were like, "Yeah, you get hurt, just rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine." But yeah, it's good that they put that on for kids because, like, some of those kids throw hard, especially those little league mounds that are like 60 feet and they're so close. You don't have time to react if that thing's coming at your face.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm not against it. I don't see any reason to be upset about it yet. Anyway, it's gonna be a little bit weird, but I don't see any reason to be like up in arms over it.
No, I don't know if it's an example of getting soft. It might be a little bit rowdy, but again, I think the players aren't going to be really on board with wanting to try to wear it unless they have to.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be a very small used thing, I think.
Jeremy Hurst, thank you for the $1.99 and then the $4.99 with a comment here. Rattler in the fourth is a must. And that's going to be a pretty interesting one because Rattler did make it through day two. He is there. I think that the value is pretty reasonable at this point. If somebody wants to take him, I think that would be about appropriate. There are some things about him that are appealing, but while I do think Rattler's a little bit of a better prospect than Sam Howell, I don't think it's by enough to validate us spending a pick on him. So I'm not really seeing the Rattler thing at the moment, personally.
Yeah, I think the Rattler thing only can kind of happen, Jeremy, is if you do have John truly in love with this guy. That it's a guy that he would really pound the table for. If he's just kind of, the value is kind of nice. I don't think that's going to be enough to bring him on to picking him. I like Sam Howell a little bit better than Rattler myself.
Yeah.
It's just kind of where I stand with it. I think it made some sense if you were going to go with a Penix that you went with the 3 quarterbacks for a year. If you're talking about going with 3 quarterbacks for a year to have Rattler on the roster, I don't know if I understand that as clearly as being as smart versus going out there and finding one of these really great players. Part of this, Jeremy, is there's so many other great players at other positions that have fallen to you there that when you look at Rattler, you're going, oh, Jadavian Sanders that I got a 2nd round grade, or one of these tight ends that we really like, or one of these safeties you got like a 3rd round grade versus back end 3rd round grade on Rattler. It's harder to talk yourself into Rattler when there's those other really nice options there. But to your point, Jeremy, is it a possibility that John does really like this guy and has sort of been laying low all this whole time to kind of jump at this point? It's possible. He's got 2 4th round picks. He might think he's got kind of a bonus pick to do what he wants there. So it's definitely possible they make them pick. The value wouldn't be bad there and select him in the 4th. It's just I think he's going to have too many other tantalizing options that he just can't deny.
If the Seahawks go into the 2024 season with Geno, Rattler, and Howell as their 3 quarterbacks, Geno starting, and then Geno either gets hurt or falls apart, who would go in first, you think, Howell or Rattler?
Howell, because he's got a year of experience. He's been in the league for 2 years.
Yeah, that's kind of, it's like the odds of Rattler making any kind of a contribution to that to the team, and really, I'd say almost his first 2 years is minuscule. He's got 2 quarterbacks to get through. Yeah. So when you remember that Howell has 2 years on his deal, it's just really tough to imagine Howell making any kind of an impact on this team during his rookie deal, and it's hard for me to get behind it when you do have guys who are clearly, if you get Jatavion Sanders, he will make a positive impact on the team in his first 2 years. Easily.
Mm-hmm. He's your starter, and after Noah Fant, you let Noah Fant probably walk next year. Probably release him out of the deal after a 1-year contract, and you roll Jadavian moving forward. So I think that just if their other options weren't so good, Jeremy, and the other options are so good because the rest of the draft, by the way so many teams have run it, has been such a mixed bag of reaches, position runs. It's left the door open in a lot of these other areas for us to really land a great player in this 4th round. that we didn't think we were going to have. I think if you ask John coming in, you're going to have Jadavian Sanders in the fourth round. You're going to have Jeremiah Trotter and Cedric Gray in the fourth round. You're going to have a collection of these safeties like Jaden Hicks available over the top of the fourth round. I don't think that's going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. So I think he's kind of sitting with an embarrassment of riches of picks to go through, and that's going to make it, I think, harder to get back to Rattler on that one.
ED Armitage, thank you for the $2. McCormick or Mahogany, and then Gray or Pratt. Right. So McCormick is really interesting because he's a phenomenal athlete and could probably play left guard. I think he's the South Dakota State guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mahogany's the Boston College right guard. Gray's, of course, the linebacker. And then Pratt's the other decent quarterback prospect left, who I think will likely go sometime in this fourth round. I mean, if you wanted to go McCormick and Gray, I would feel really good about that.
Yeah, and I'm not as high on McCormick myself. He can move, there's no doubt about that. And he uniquely moves. I wouldn't push back against any of that. I like Mahogany better. You could put a highlight mixtape together of Mahogany pulling in space and destroying people. He is the best destroyer of people at the second level as a blocker in this draft. So he would be a real pure fit. He tested pretty well as well for his size at 6'3", 314. Very, very similar scores to Christian Haynes. So I do think that he can fit over to left guard. Pass protection is a little more hit and miss with Mahogany, but McCormick, I just didn't like his ability to push guys off the line of scrimmage. I think Mahogany can do that. 314 with 33.5-inch long arms. And then I would go Cedric Gray all day over Michael Pratt.
Yeah, I think Mahogany's better, but I'm just saying maybe if you view him as right guard only and you think that Haynes is right guard only and you're like, well, we don't need another right guard, then I would maybe go McCormick instead. It depends on how you view him as a player. Depends on how you view him as a prospect.
Yeah, and that's the hard part for me is if we're picking that fourth round, I got the third round grade on Mahogany. I got the fourth round grade on McCormick. And that's where I go, well, I don't want to pick for need. And so I get where you're coming from on that. And that's maybe where you're led to go into a different position at that point and looking at that way. But that's the part I'd have an issue with. Just I feel like we're fourth round's the right place to go with McCormick, but you got a third round guard there instead. That's better.
Yeah. I mean, like double dipping at the exact same position is a little bit tricky, I think, especially when it comes to offensive linemen, when you already may have a guy on Bradford who you at least like somewhat. So it just depends on how you view all these guys. Do you think they can move to a different position or not? How much do you like them? Maybe they don't like Bradford that much. They think he's just a career backup. That's possible too.
Yeah, he's a rough guy that has to round out the rough edges, may not round those edges off.
Okay, so, but yeah, Cedric Gray would be great. And Pratt, I mean, fourth round's about right. But again, what's Pratt doing for me that Howell is not?
Yeah, I agree. There's not enough. I like Howell better than Pratt. I like Howell better than Rattler. I like him better than any of the quarterbacks in this draft. And if that's the case, I ain't doing it. I was willing to do a Michael Penix because I thought Michael Penix is going to be better than Sam Howell. So it's a different stage when it's on these quarterbacks at the back end. I just don't see the win in that doing that. I don't see the upside in Rattler or Pratt. I think they're basically career backups. No reason to draft those guys high.
Roy Froelich, thank you for the $5 Canadian. Jaden Hicks with our first pick tomorrow.
Let's go.
Am I crazy? I mean, no. you could be, but I don't think this take is the reason why you would be if you are.
That's right.
Like, I don't know. You could send another super chat and say that you think S is a vowel or that E is a consonant. And then I'd say that's a little, but this take, no. Jaden Hicks is probably the best safety left. And I put a fourth round grade on him. So I'd say that's pretty fair.
Yeah, he is on the ESPN board right now, Roy, as the default highest graded remaining safety on the board. I like him a little bit better than Brendan in the third round. So to get that guy in the fourth round, if Seattle jumped there, completely would make sense. The safeties we have on the roster starting next year are on 1-year deals. So getting out ahead of that for a position where there's a lot of good value in this draft remaining at makes a lot of sense. Not crazy at all.
So yeah, if they do that, I'm not going to be unhappy about that at all. I think that's we need safety depth. We don't really have anything behind our starters right now, except for Jarek Reed, who probably won't be ready for kickoff day one.
Yeah, exactly. Hard to count on that. So
Kayvon Wallace too. I guess Kayvon Wallace.
Yeah, Kayvon, but that's that 1-year deal thing. It's Kayvon 1 year. I guess Rashawn Jenkins, you have 2 year. So you have 2 years of him, but then Julian Love's on a 1-year deal too.
Let's see here. Concierge with Nolan. Thank you for the $5. $5 more for the please no Rattler jar. It was a
Amen.
lot more interesting before we traded for Howell. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, if there's no Hal here, Nolan, I'll definitely be like, hey, Rattler tomorrow, great value, go. But with Hal here, you've already gotten a better option to me than Rattler. He moves better, and I know you disagree with me on Brent, but I think he has a stronger arm. I think Rattler has a quicker delivery. But I love and maybe deals with the blitz a little bit better. But at the end of the day, my outlook is Hal's a little bit better. So I just can't come back to Rattler at that point. That's why we love the trade of Hal. That was a great trade by John. He didn't give up any real draft capital and got a guy that was going to be an upgrade over a guy you might take in this third or fourth round here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even if I do think Rattler is a little bit better, and I do, it's not by enough to move me to spend a pick on it.
Yeah, especially for a guy that's just going to sit in Nowheresville for maybe a couple of years until you move out Gino or Sam goes and moves on. That's a long out sort of pick for in the division.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, at this point, I think we can get guys who can help us now, especially with the way the board broke with this. I've got 3 second-round guys still on the board for me.
Mm-hmm. I think it's somewhat similar to me too on my end of this. So, there's just too many good guys already. You mentioned Cedric Van Pran, and I mean, there's just somebody was asking me on my stream, Brendan, on a donation, and they said, well, who's the likely guy they're going to pick next tomorrow on the second pick in the fourth round? And I kind of went, I don't know what to tell you, man. I'm not being a homer here. There's 20 names of guys that all foot the bill, that all be great value, that completely would be understandable picks there. Seattle sits in a really good position in this draft, already on top of making 2 of the really nice picks that they've made, in my opinion, to really continue to finish this off right by the way that the NFL's run this, because this has been a bit of a Mickey Mouse draft for me with the rest of the NFL. I got to say, even the teams that have done good, you can find some bad pick in there where it's like, what did you do there? The Cardinals with Isaiah Adams. I mean, I had a 6th round grade on Isaiah Adams, Brendan. 6th round grade. Mm-hmm. So for them to be taking that guy as early as they did is like,
yeah. Yes. And yeah, after our pick, we had the Cardinals going with Tip Ryman, who I do like, but 3rd round was a little much for me. Blake Corum to the Rams, which is okay. I didn't like Corum that much the more I looked into him.
Me neither.
Yeah.
I limited.
Mm-hmm. Pooney was good. He went to the Niners. That's a good pick.
Good.
Elijah Jones to the Cardinals. I don't understand that one really. Were much better corners on the board.
Amen. Yeah. It's not that they had bad drafts that are NFC West foes. It's just that there's some holes in them, right? There's some good picks, but there's just as many holes as they're good picks. And that's where I get stoked. And there's been some teams that I just think are just having like, what are you doing? There's a couple of teams in here where it's like, I don't quite, get the, like the Atlanta Falcons going with Rook and then Braylon Trice. Ravens, I like Roger Rosengarten, but Nate Wiggins in the first, and then Adisa Isaac, right? Yeah. Like Cole Bishop going in the 2nd round out of Utah, and then Dwayne Carter with the Buffalo Bills. I like Dwayne, but more probably around later. We can kind of almost go team by team with this, where it's like Ravens take Xavier Legette in the 1st round, which a lot of people thought was too high. Jonathan Brooks, who might be the best back, but I mean, I don't think he's as good as the last couple backs that gone in the 2nd round. And then they take Trayvon Wallace, that a lot of people had as a later inside linebacker in this draft. Many more people had Gray and Trotter higher than that guy. And he's like the 450th rated inside linebacker by PFF last year. So you go team by team here and you just, okay, that was good. There's bad, good. No one's really uniformly just kicking this draft's ass. And I love it.
I like what the Eagles are doing.
I like the Eagles, yes.
Yeah, they're doing well. They got the best corner at, what was it, 22?
And then they got corners.
Yeah, and then they got Cooper in the 2nd round, and they must have been feeling themselves so much that they decided to take Jalix Hunt. But I think Jalix Hunt has some very intriguing potential personally. I don't even hate that. It's a little bit of a reach for a guy who is not a good football player yet, but there is something very interesting there. So I like what the Eagles are doing.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to see much on Jalix just because the Houston Christian tape was so reduced. But Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, this is a team, to your point on this, that is meeting that value to need. And they took the best player on the board on with Quinyon Mitchell, first cornerback, basically taking the best cornerback, I think, in this draft taken. And then you come back with DeJean, who I had number 2. This is a team that had Darius Slay kind of on a downward last year. Jeremy Bradbury looking like kind of a little bit getting that sort of shell of your former self. You just upgraded both positions immediately with 2 guys who should be able to probably start day one.
Exactly. Jack M, thank you for the $2. Mustafa or Dorless, please. Thanks for the show.
There we
So
go.
I think that's Malik Mustafa, right? The
Malik
Wake Forest
Mustafa.
safety.
Yep.
Yeah, I know that there are quite a few people that are pretty into him. I'm not sure he has the flexibility to exist in a Mike McDonald defense, but he was definitely interesting. He was really strong, and he played very irregularly for a smaller safety.
Yeah, he's well, and he's a good run defender. I mean, that's what stands out with him, which might appeal to Mike McDonald tomorrow. Only allowed 175 yards in coverage last year, and then he was also the ninth best defending run safety in college football, as rated by PFF. So he's not a guy that I've been as high on, to be honest with you, Jack. But nonetheless, he's a very talented safety, and we're getting into that place where it's perfectly fine to be taking him there with what he's going to bring as a possible upside. You get into round 4, and it's kind of, it's hard to be like, oh, you're reaching there. This is all a little bit into flyer territory. Brandon Dorless has some Michael Bennett vibes. He kind of gives off with his body style and his movement. Another guy just didn't quite get as much hot to trot on, but I don't hate him as a player. Like with Mustafa, that they're good players. They'll find a place of home in this league. Dorless just struck me as a little bit at times, a little kind of tweenerish. Not really an edge, not really an inside guy.
Yeah, I don't know where he ends up in the NFL. I agree.
Yeah, so it's a little hard to kind of feel where you're at with it. And I didn't like his 22 tape at all. Like the 23 tape a little bit better, but 22 tape was really rough for me. So, but a lot of people like him, Jack. Both of these two players you bring up, whether it's our opinion on it, that doesn't always matter. There are a lot of Hawk fans out there that talk about these two guys and are very, very high on these two guys. I've heard a variety of people mention them in my chat today too, on both accounts. So certainly they are in a possibility. Dorless is going to be hard though, because I think he's a 3-tech. Team's now got, unless they're really truly going to remove Draymond, Leonard Williams, Draymond Jones, Byron Murphy, Mike Morris. Go by Brandon Dorless is your number 5 at that point. That might be a little tough. Maybe they look at him as one of their hard edges. Like they'll be able to put him on the edge instead and have him just set the hard edge. I just didn't think he showed enough of that in college when he was asked to do that.
Right. So yeah, and I think Dorless is a 4th round value, so it would be okay, but I don't know what he does in the NFL, like you said. But I think that's about it. I mean, we both love the pick. We both love the way this draft is going overall, and we just want to see what happens next.
We do, man. I'm sure some of us want to hear be a little bit, find some negativity, not just be complete, homer, but it's not being homers. We do these draft study and we watch these players and you want to see the value be right. And to me, the value's been right. I know you're not as big a Byron Murphy. I think you weren't out on the pick though either. And that's where, to me, this is a draft being run smart. And for the 3rd straight year, Brendan, tell me if I'm wrong on this. I think we can say with ultimate certainty that John Schneider has thoroughly pivoted off need and he is now living in value. That's why these drafts are going so well.
Right. And we'll see if they continue to stick to that philosophy tomorrow. We have 5 picks. We have 2 coming up very early, so get up on time. If you do not get up at 9 o'clock, you will miss our first pick because we are picking almost immediately. And we got 2 picks very early. Should be able to get some good players with them. I'm excited. I think you guys should all be excited too. I'm going to be streaming starting at 9. And Brandon, I imagine that you'll be doing the same over there.
I might be speaking only in a whisper, but I will be live.
You've got 10 hours to learn sign language.
Well, I'm mainlining honey. That's what I've decided. I'm just gonna take the honey, squish it down the gullet after the show today.
So yeah, we'll both be covering it. We'll both be streaming it. Mark Sanchez, thank you for the $5. What do you guys think about getting Jordan Travis? Oh, yep. Oh, that's a wonderful PFP. What do you guys think about getting Jordan Travis late? I mean, again, I just wonder if there's room for him on this team because we already have 2 quarterbacks. But I do like Jordan Travis. I'll say that.
Jordan Travis is Mark Sanchez, my favorite quarterbacks of the remaining quarterbacks. I do like him more than Spencer Rattler. The injury thing pushed him behind Spencer on my board, but I still liked him more as a player purely if he wasn't injured. If you want to take a flyer on him in the 5th or 6th, sure. I don't want to do it in the 4th round. As Brendan said, the big part of this is Sam Howell's got the 2 years of club control here. So unless the team really feels like they're going to be in a position to find maybe a trade partner for Geno a year from now or something, I don't see a lot of the reason to go to that 3rd quarterback. To me, it only made sense if it was to get a guy that you looked at it to be your really tried and true guy of the future. They trade up for Michael Penix. Whether you like that pick or not, or them trading up, you wouldn't have been able to deny this is them itemizing and saying, this is our guy for the future. And I don't think that in grading Jordan Travis, that's what they would be saying. And that's what I think is going to cause John not to go with quarterback tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just like again, a third string quarterback you're drafting. I don't know if that's something you need to necessarily spend a pick on, especially not right now with the way the team is set up. Like you already kind of have a young guy. We basically drafted Sam Howell, right? By some definition, we used about a 5th round draft pick on Sam Howell.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how I look at it. So I just don't when it comes back to get another QB, keep in mind too, Mark, you got to go 3 quarterbacks on your active roster now if you're going to do that. And if you're just doing that on a kind of flyer QB at the back end of the draft, you're robbing from another position group that you would like to have better buttressed up for game day, so you have some depth there if there is some injuries. Now you're going to only run 2 active tight ends on game day. Now we're going to run 1 less wide receiver out there and be available. I don't think it's worthwhile to get yourself in that pickle for a guy that might be a Jordan Travis or a Rattler or a Michael Pratt type. I think if you're going to do that, it's got to be for a guy that you are over the moon for and trust that in the long term, this guy is going to be our guy.
Mm-hmm. Power Hitter, thank you for the $1.99. Who is your fave picks for round 4? Well, we already talked about this pretty extensively, but just to recap the names, Jatavion Sanders, Cedric Van Pran, TJ Tampa, Kyrie Jackson, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Cade Stover, Christian Mahogany, and Cedric Gray would be my guys.
And Jeremiah Trotter. I would add to that. I think Brendan's list is pretty good there, Power Hitter. I would add Jeremiah Trotter in there as well. For me as a possibility. But that sounds about right. Maybe Tanner Bortolini, if they really love him with his movement, depending on if they saw him as maybe a left guard type guy too. So those would be about the guys for me too that I would look to lock in on. I think that's a good list from Brendan there.
Let me see if I missed anybody. If you want a running back, Audric Esteem might be my guy. I think he'd be a nice complement to the backs that we have as a power back.
He's a power back. Can't go wrong with having a guy in there in the short yard situations you can bring out, especially if it means you're getting Walker off the field in those situations. Because I hate running him out there in power. I just hate it's not his game.
Right. I mean, people act like it's Charbonnet's game. It's really not. He's a third down back more than he's a power back to me. Like that's his skill set.
He's got some power elements to him. He does, but it's not your grinder with arms grabbing at him and pulling through. He's more of your explosive hitting, almost running back.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. So we will be back tomorrow. Me on my channel, Brandon on the Hawksnest channel. And I think odds are good we're not going to be convening until the next day to kind of put a bow on this draft. The way I see it, UDFA is part of day 3 as well. So we want to let UDFA settle before we commit to anything, because the way things are going, there are going to be some very interesting UDFAs out there. And the Seahawks are probably going to be involved in that, like every team is.
They are. Yeah, they always are very active in UDFAs. And as we saw last year, one of our better rookies last year was who? Jake Bobo, who came in and showed you what you can get from those kind of players. So it's not just something to be overlooked. That also Rans, they can bring impact. They can bring immediate impact. You can get some diamonds in the rough that have slipped through the cracks. It does happen. So pay attention to the draft tomorrow. Pay attention to those UDFAs, and you'll really get the clear picture of what the Seahawks are looking to do in this draft.
All right. So thank you for coming out, everybody. Great attendance tonight. And in 10 hours, we're doing it all over again.
Flip it right back around, Brandon. This draft don't stop. This train just keeps on motoring.
So thank you, Brandon, for doing this with me. I know you had to really fight to get this done, but I think it was worth it. I think it panned out. Thank you to everybody who came out. And one last time before the draft ends, one last time while we're putting some good energy out there, hoping that this team makes the right decisions. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.